Hey guys, welcome back. And today we're going to do a quick lesson about collecting data and what's known as sampling in terms of statistics. Before we get started, I just want to talk about two different terms that we need to be aware of in terms of collecting data and sampling and when we're looking at statistics. So the first one is the population. And when I talk about population, I refer to the people in the entire group. The people or things in the entire group, because stats isn't always about people. Entire group. When I talk about sample, I mean a smaller group selected from the population. So from the population. Now, the reason we're going to talk about the difference is because ideally in statistics we want to find the entire population, but it's not always possible. For example, if we wanted to know like what favorite movie everybody liked, we could potentially ask the entire population of Canada, but it's not necessary and it's very time consuming. So what happens a lot of the time is that people doing statistics will take a sample, so they'll take a smaller. Another example would be the population of the entire school, but your sample might consist of like 2 or 3 grade 9 classes. Okay, so from that school. So I just want to make that clear, what the difference between population and sample is, which gets me to the point. There's a couple different ways that you can take that smaller group or decide what that smaller group is going to be. And depending on how you do it may affect the calculations or may affect the data. So we need to keep in mind how it's working. So let's go through some of the sampling techniques and I'll tell you some of the key features of it. So simple random sampling is just where individuals are chosen totally at random. Individuals chosen at random, and there's no process to it. For example, you might like pick names out of a hat. So it's entirely unpredictable, entirely random. You don't know who you're going to get before you even do it. That's the most simple way to take a sample of your population. Cluster sampling has a bit of a process first. The first thing you do is divide the group into the entire population into smaller groups. So this might be like, if we're talking about the population of a school, it might be that your groups are the actual classes, okay? And then what happens is you choose a few individuals. Choose a few individuals from each group. So how that might look in a class or in a school is that like you would you could group them all into grade 9s, grade 10s, grade 11s, and grade 12s. And then you're going to choose like 10 grade 9s, 10 grade 10s, 10 grade 11s, 10 grade 12s. So you take like the same number from each individual group to make up the sample. Stratified random sampling is still grouping, but it's grouped kind of differently. In which case it's grouped so that the smaller groups so that the sample is representative of the entire population. So for example, if you have in your school, if you have more grade 12s than you do of grade 9s, it makes more sense to select more grade 12s than it would to select more grade 9s. So it's not that everything's kind of even, it's that it's representative. So the same percentage of like grade 9s, grade 10s, grade 11s, and grade 12s of your sample looks like the same percentages as the whole population. And I'm going to show you how to do this. In the example, because it takes a little bit of calculations to figure it out. So we'll do that later in the note. Systematic sampling is done a lot like in terms of manufacturing, or like if you're going to knock on doors or call people. But it's where every nth person or thing, individual is surveyed or is part of the sample. Now, for example, if we went door to door, we might say that we're going to go to every 5th house. Or if we're going to like call numbers out of a phone book, maybe I say I'm going to call every 10th phone number. Okay, so there's a process to it. If I'm in a manufacturer, maybe I pick one every 50th piece and I get that sampled. So that's how systematic sampling works. So there are 3 other types of sampling, but in this type of sampling, you may run into what's known as bias, and it's when the sample doesn't exactly represent the entire population. So we need to be careful when looking at statistics that the person who did the surveying or collecting the data didn't do this type of sampling, because it's really not the best type of sampling. However, convenience sampling is basically when you take the sample, you do what's easiest for you. You are surveying people where it's easy. And now what I mean by that is, like, let's say, for example, that you want to find out like favorite movies from people, and you decide that the best way to take a sample is to just stand outside the movie theater and ask people. It basically takes very little work. All you have to do is stand there and ask whoever walks by. So that's kind of interesting. It could be biased because let's say that you're standing outside a movie theater that's playing the latest Marvel movie, and everybody coming out is saying, yeah, my favorite movie is action. Obviously, because they just came from an action movie. So be careful with convenience sampling. Judgment sampling happens when you already know something about the population that you're going to be looking at. Something about the sample. For example, if you are asking, let's say you're asking people about biking or cycling, and you ask a bunch of people at a cycle shop, you're asking people, you already know kind of what they're going to say. So be careful about judgment sampling, because that happens. And the last one is voluntary sampling. Now this basically works where You put it out there, and only those interested will actually, only those interested will respond. This happens a lot in, example, TV or radio polls or newspaper, where they like put the poll out there, and then just whoever responds to it, and it actually is more biased because only those listening, or only those that actually care about it, will typically respond. So be careful of that. So now I'll quickly show you how to do a stratified sample. If we look at our example, they want to survey Ontarians' attitudes towards sport utility vehicles and trucks, and they go to 3 different cities and randomly select 200 people from each city. I noticed that that equals 600 people total. Guelph has a population of 126,000, Peterborough 75,000, and Windsor 208,000. The question is, what is wrong with selecting 200 people from each city? The answer, it's not representative because the cities are different sizes. It makes more sense to interview more people from the bigger cities than it does from the smaller city like Peterborough. Representative. It's not representative. Part B, I'll show you how to correct it. So the first thing you're going to do is find out what is the total population of all 3 of those cities. So if you add 126,000 plus 75,000 plus 208,000, we get 409,000. And then what we're going to do is find the percentage of each, and then find out how many from that 600 we should actually do. So I'll go through Guelph, and then I'll show you what happens. So if we take Guelph, it was 126,000. Divide by 409,000. And 126 divided by the 409 is approximately 31%. And if we times that by our 600, so 0.31 times 600 means that we're going to actually survey approximately 184 people. Now you'll do the same thing for Peterborough and Windsor, and I'll do that, and I'll show you what the actual totals are. So now you see, if you do the same calculations for all 3 cities, we get that we're going to actually do 184 people from Guelph, 110 people from Peterborough, and 305 people from Windsor, which makes sense. Windsor has the bigger population, so we should interview more people from Windsor. Peterborough has the smallest, so we'll do less people. So now we've got it a little bit more representative. So that's how a stratified sample works, and I know you've got questions like that in your practice stuff, so I wanted to point that out. Okay, have a great day. Bye.